So as promised, after some Torah mind gymnastics, in which we broke our brains to understand some of God's Torah, that's what we have to remember when we do these things. Going through the mental exercise and trying to figure out what each verse and line means. It's not just for the fun of it, although it's very enjoyable. The main thing is this is God's Torah. What else to break your brains on, right? This is like the Gemara says, Adam la'amal yuvalid, man is born to toil. And the person can choose what stresses his mind out, what keeps him up at night.
Right.
Does it keep him up at night because he can't remember how to explain the Gemara, or keep him up, God forbids him something else?
That's
so
what your father said that.
That's right.
During the high holidays.
My father mentioned that during the high holidays.
To know what you want to stress over.
That's right.
And,
that's right. So God, that's right.
You should stress over Torah.
So God gave us the opportunity. That's right.
Mundane matters.
So God gave us opportunity to stress our minds over His thoughts.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, Torah provides inspiration too.
But
so that's what's coming today.
Hashem is compassionate because he balances it out with some rigorous mental exercise with some more.
Yeah. Well, we say in our prayer, which is quite interesting that the prayer is said along with the prayer for the temple. It's quite interesting, right? Just before Haidun. That God should rebuild the temple in our days. And then we say, give us our portion in your Torah. So it's God's Torah, and God's Torah is God's Torah no matter what line you read. But nonetheless, each Jew has the ability to find their portion in Torah, the place of Torah that talks to them. So God's compassionate that way. It's His Torah no matter which part of Torah you're reading, but then God provides your portion in Torah. And it's interesting that it's connected to the temple. As if the temple. Yeah, well, that's what we're asking for Hashem to send Mashiach, right? But it's just interesting that. Sorry?
We're asking God to rebuild the temple. Okay.
Yeah, there's different opinions about who's going to build a Beis Mikdash, and in the next essay that we're about to read on Shabbos, we're going to address it. Maybe not this week; it'll take a few weeks till we get there. But we're going to address
I remember we learned a little bit about.
We did learn a little about.
Even if we just put the doors, it's like we did it.
That's right. So there's different ways of reconciling the. We're going to get to it, God willing, on Shabbos afternoon. Not this week, probably in a few weeks, but we're going to get to it. Anyway, but it's just interesting that we refer to this in the same prayer, asking God for our place in Torah and the temple. It's almost as if there's the literal temple that we look forward to, the physical temple in Jerusalem with divine manifestation here on earth. And then there is the personal temple, a place of personal divine manifestation. And that personal temple is when you find your portion in Torah, when you find your place in Torah, you find that part of Torah that talks to you, that you can connect to Hashem. That's your personal temple. This is your personal meeting place with Hashem. Kind of, and that's perhaps why those two requests go hand in hand.
That's funny.
It's interesting, like we're asking God for the temple, and then the next thing is find your portion in Torah. What's the connection? And it seems like this is the connection.
That's funny because for me personally, when I study about the temple,
you connect to that a lot.
Interesting part.
Interesting, that's nice.
For me. Huh? I do. I like this.
So there's Mishnayos, there's Rambam, there's
diagrams,
there's the verses in Ezekiel.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
The last Ukrainian book came out, gave a beautiful diagram, and they numbered each little thing there.
There's a temple.
Yeah, I think it was from. I noticed the footnote there where the source was from this Rambam Press.
Rambam Press.
Dr. Baruch.
I think we have it in our office. The index.
Davidoff, I think.
We have it in the library. I think the Rambam index with summaries and indexes.
Yeah.
We have it in the library.
We have it because I was thinking of ordering it.
You can order it too. Just think we have to have it.
No, I know, but I didn't know. So now I can
have it in the library, and we have 2 books in the library that have full-scale size pictures.
Yeah,
we saw it.
Yeah. Yeah, great.
Yeah.
No, because there's so many facets to it.
It's very intricate, very detailed. It's very good. Yeah. Anyway, okay.
One for the wood, one for the stones, one for the mikvah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Multiple mikvahs.
Multiple mikvah. There's the basement. There's one.
Yeah. Okay. So here we are. The line begins. It's the last word on the line, which is Darish, and the next line is Reish Ayin, which stands for Rabbi Akiva. 17a, Zayin with Aleph. Darish Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva expounded and taught the following, kind of a sermon. I guess that's the best way to translate the word Darish. Darish means like he lectured, he gave a sermon. So you already know that what's about to come is kind of an inspirational sort of thing. He says as follows, Ish v'isha, man and woman, zachu, if they merit, shchina beinehem, the presence of God manifests between them. Lo zachu, if they do not merit, eish oichalasan, a fire consumes them. This is what he said. This was Rabbi Akiva's teaching. So Rashi helps us decipher the teaching. So merit means, Rashi tells us, to go in an uprighteous path, that there's no promiscuity, not on his end, not on her end. And then if they merit, they're behaving properly, they're on the straight and narrow, their fidelity, and the presence of Hashem is between them. This is because in Hebrew, the word you just used for man and woman is ish and isha. We had in last week's parsha, the creation of isha. So ish and isha are the same letters. They both have 3 letters. 2 of them on both of those words is aleph and shin. Ish is aleph yud shin, it's man, and woman, isha, is aleph shin hey. So take away the yud and the hey, the yud from ish and the hey from isha, and you're left with aleph shin for man and aleph shin for woman. The word aleph shin is ish, fire. So if they merit, then the man has a yud, the woman has the hey, and those 2 letters, yud and hey, are Hashem's name. But if you take away the yud and the hey, if they don't have God between them, then all you're left with is fire, aleph shin, and the fire consumes them. Following? Yeah. So there's a lot of interesting things here. I'm going to go through one by one.
Fire.
So first of all, we have this idea of fire. Fire consumes, but even when the name of Hashem is there, the yud and the hey is there, you still have fire. You still have aleph and shin.
But it's controlled, right? Controlled.
It just has God's name in it. So, because fire in a marriage could be one of 2 things. It's either passion, which is a positive thing, or it's consuming. And sometimes it's the same passion that can be consuming too. Like if you're saying controlled, right? So if a guy is a very passionate fellow, so that can mean that his marriage is going to be very passionate, or it could also mean that even while he's married, he's passionate on the side too. And then that same passion is the fire that burns his house down. Right? But if there's a presence of God there, and there's a sense of reverence, and if you're saying controlled passion, meaning passion that is, what's the word? Directed. Yeah, contained. But contained almost sounds like you have to stymie your passion. No, it's not about stymieing, but yeah, it's more. It's sorry. Channeled. So if the passion is channeled just between husband and wife, then this is a good marriage. Another part of fire is an interesting element, which is when 2 fires come together, you don't have 2 competing elements, right? Water is similar in this sense, actually, where when water and water come together, they don't compete, they just merge.
Like oil.
So similar with fire, but like objects, when they come together, they compete really, because they. Sorry.
Oil and water.
Oil and water will compete. Who, right? But fire and water, but in this case, we're using fire because we're talking about passion. If it's done right, it doesn't compete. It's not like who's more passionate in the marriage. It becomes one fire. So the name of Hashem is equally split between man and woman because it becomes really one it's no longer an I and an I, but it's a we. It's a singular unit of we. It's like two fires coming together. Yeah. The challenge of the fire is to make sure it doesn't stray off to go passionate somewhere else. That's another thing to point out. Sorry?
I think that would be similar to a forest fire out of control. Just
a forest fire out of control rather than a fire that warms the home. Right?
Most men find it very hard to contain themselves.
Of course. Yeah. By nature. Look, by nature, the Gemara says, not here, but the Gemara says elsewhere, Ish darakoi lichaboish. It's man's nature to conquer. This is a biological thing as well. As by nature, man's biologically designed to want to have as many offspring with as many partners as possible. Women biologically are more selective because they have to rear the children that are born of their offspring. So biologically, they're more selective. So they wait to be chosen in some ways. Whereas man is going out there and trying to conquer. Man's got to direct his passions to make sure it's in the right direction. If he does, then again, the presence of Hashem is there. Right? Or another way of putting it is not just that. The simple reading of Gemara is that if man and woman control themselves and they join their passions to each other, then they're inviting God in. We might say the reverse too. By inviting God into our relationship, we're going to make sure our passion is aligned. Right? If it's a godless passion, then and it's driven by the sensual self, then it can run off to who knows where. But because I've invited God in and say, hold on a second, I got to know when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate, and where it's appropriate and when it's and with whom it's appropriate, then the fire can be a fire that's a oneness between husband and wife. It's another way of thinking about it.
It's interesting. Is this from Rabbi Kiva?
It's all from Rabbi Kiva.
Because this personally in his life, I think he was separated from his wife.
And she was proud of it.
She was proud of it.
She sent him off to learn the first time. And when he came back, she sent him before, without even knowing it, she sent him off again. Remember? 14. He came back and he heard from the window that she was talking to another woman who was making fun of her because her husband's away. And she said, for his success, I would send him even further. She didn't even walk into his house. She turned back around and went back. All right. So she was proud of it.
One sense, that could have been a strained marriage.
You would think that it might have been, but it wasn't. It had a.
This day,
sorry?
This day it would be.
It's all relative. It's all relative. You know, I'll tell you. I tell this to people all the time. Says, oh, my wife doesn't want me to go to Fabrengen, doesn't want to go to Shir, it's too late, it's too this, doesn't want to go to the oil for Shabbos, whatever. Says, it depends how you come back.
What?
It depends how you come back. If you come back from a Fabrengen and you're infused with divine energy and excitement, and you bring it back home and share it, and you become a better husband as a result, your wife will send you more often.
Yeah, that would have been a good investment.
Right. But if you're not inviting God, it's just a selfish passion. I want to have a good time at the Fabrengen, and you come home and it's like, oh, now I can't have a good time anymore. And obviously, your wife's not going to want to send you again.
Yeah.
Right. But if you come back and say, come to your wife and say, I want to share with you what I learned. I read this and I heard this, and it was so exciting. We did this, and let me help you with that. And she's going to send you again because you've invited Hashem into that passion, so she wants to share in it. Right.
Reminded me so much. This is bringing back so many memories. As a kid, 18
Pass the tissues, please.
18 to 17 to 22 years. And whole life was the bowling alley, the racetrack, the hockey games, games. We used to make fun of you. 6 games and everything. And my parents used to say, where were you? Shouldn't be there.
All right.
And now, when I come back, when I tell Karen I'm going for Reagan, I might be home at 4 o'clock. Go.
All right.
How was the Reagan?
Exactly. How was it like? What did you hear? What was it like? Exactly. So if you come back and share the feeling that you got from the enthusiasm and you're exactly, and you're more present for her then, and she's going to want you to go back again. But if it's a selfish passion, and you come home and then of course she's not going to want to send you again. Why would you? Anyway, it's related, even though it's off topic. But another element I want to point out. So the word here is zachu, meritorious. They're meritorious, and the presence of Hashem is there. This word zachum, the root word is zach, zayin chaf, which means merit, but zach also means to be refined, to be refined. So it's not just merit and that behave well. They don't technically, betray infidelity. But there's also a certain refinement in the relationship itself between the two of them. How they speak, how they talk to each other, how they share with each other. There's a certain refinement there. Even in their intimacy, especially in their intimacy, there's a refinement. There's a, how to say it? There's a constant. Yeah, there's a refinement. There's a in Yiddish you say edelkeit. There's a subtlety. There's a nuance. Not everything has to be explicit. Not everything has to be, people tell me, oh, we're so comfortable, we do this and that together. Are you comfortable, or have you lost all sense of mystery, lost sense of refinement, of wow, of wonder, and everything's out in the open on the table? It lacks refinement, it lacks mystery, it lacks, if that's the way it is, there's not going to be, the fire is going to be consumed. The fire is not going to be a passionate, shared one. But if there's a mystery, if there are things that are unspoken, but we understand it, we know because we connect. In that zach, in that subtlety, in that refinement, that's where you can invite Hashem into that relationship. That's perhaps another thing. There's for sure more layers to this, and a lot to bring about on this subject. Okay, so this is Rabbi Akiva's teaching. Yeah, Rabbi Akiva's teaching is that if husband and wife meritorious, the presence of Hashem is there, because again, the letters of Hashem's name, Yud and Hey, are split. The Yud in Ish, man, and Hey in Isha, woman, and the other letters are Ish, the fire of their marriage, the passion of their marriage is with Hashem's name, Yud and Hey. Oh, before we go to the next line, I want to point out one more thing, a little bit Kabbalistic, since we like to do that here. Actually, two layers of Kabbalah here, which are related. Number one is the letters Yud and Hey. The letters Yud and Hey of Hashem's name represent certain levels, right? So the Yud, as we've discussed here before, is a dot. The letter Yud is a dot, which is the level of Chachma, the level of insight, the level of wisdom. It's the stroke of genius that pops into the mind, the first thing, right? It's a kernel of an idea before it's developed, before it's expounded in Bina, which is level 2, the Hey, right? So Yud is Chachma, the insight, the first thought, the little spark of genius, the dot, and then that's expanded in the letter Hey, the Bina, the understanding. And this matches man and woman, even physically. Man gives the seed, like just the kernel, the DNA, and woman physically develops it, right? Physically, Bina. And in some ways, in many ways, this is true, not just in the physical relationship, but man gives the tiny seed and then the woman develops it into a full child, the Yud and the Hey, the Chachma and the Bina, but there's also in their interaction also. Man, in the relationship, in the way they talk and the way they share, husband maybe puts down, a central idea and a kernel, that allows the woman to express, to expand, to explore, because that's the way women are. Men are much more concise. We like to just, here's the point, this is where we're at. But woman likes to expound and share and analyze and think and discover. And there's a certain empathy that comes along with that also. The Gemara says, Bina Yeseda Nitna Leisha. There's an extra Bina, this word understanding. Right? There's a certain empathy and sympathy in the woman's listening and extrapolating and pulling out from, you said one little line, but she can extrapolate what you really felt and what you really meant and how you really understood it, developing the little feeling you shared. There's that whole development. And when the partners recognizes the value of the other in this dynamic, that's when Hashem's name is split equally, so to speak, and it's invested in both of them.
What happens in a secular marriage?
Sorry?
What happens in a secular marriage when they're both very close together and loving and everything else and sharing. But God's out of the picture.
It's very rare. I shouldn't say I'm not a statistician. I have no idea. I shouldn't say that. I'm not a statistician. I have no clue. But God bless them. Can I say? I don't know. Hope they have good, happy marriages for many years. I have the Torah's way. This is the Torah's way of doing it. So how others do it, I can't do it.
No, but there's a lot of seculars. It's like that. They're very close and loving and everything, and do things together to share. But God's out of the picture. They don't talk about God. They don't go to cinema.
They can level up their relationship. They can level it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway.
Too bad they don't know that.
Sorry?
Too bad they don't know that.
Yeah. There's also my father always talks about this idea that at the core, in order for a marriage to work, really, I'm very young. I don't have that much experience, but I like to. The Rabbi once told his friend, or I think it was the previous Rabbi once told his friend, that I might be younger than you, but with my father's years, I'm much older than you. I've had a great teacher, and I can learn and watch. But my father always said that the secret, or one of the elements of healthy marriage, is to recognize that marriage itself is beyond you. It's a godly idea. If you're just working selfishly, at one point you get bored and you're out. Right? So that's also part of what the Gemara is telling us here. Inviting God into the relationship is key to understanding that the marriage is bigger than you, bigger than both of you. You're both committed to this greater thing called marriage that Hashem gave for us. Sorry?
Cogs in the big machine.
Yeah. In some ways, all of marriage is there to teach you a little humility. Teach you to surrender to something bigger than you. Surrender to something bigger than you. You have to know when the line is between surrender and abuse. You have to know when the line is. And if you feel like you're on that line, talk to someone professionally to get help to make sure you're not at that line. But assuming there's a healthy communication between husband and wife, then that would be the ultimate. They're both committed to this thing called marriage, which is greater than each of them individually. I give you a classic example. I remember I had this speaking
One is greater than the parts or something.
Yeah, I'll give you an example, just a practical example to make the point. So I was talking to a couple, and typical, nothing out of the ordinary. And she's complaining about how his mother treats her. And he says, "Oh yeah, your mother said to me." So what's wrong with that conversation? Sorry?
It's irrelevant.
Why is your mother treating her badly relevant to her mother treating you badly? Is it a tit for tat? You're suffering, so we're going to even it out by me suffering? The core problem here is that you see your problems as separate. Her problem is her problem, not mine. My problem is my problem, not hers. And if we can balance them out, then what's your problem? No. Her problem is also your problem because there's a we. And his problem is also your problem. So if we're going to deal with mother-in-law A, then we'll deal with that together as a unit. And if we're dealing with mother-in-law B, then we'll deal with that together as a unit. Because it's not like your suffering is balanced out by my suffering. What is it? What? But at the core, the mistake is of thinking that we're like, what can we get out of this relationship? Can you give me enough to counteract what I'm giving you? And if not, what are we doing here? Right? And we're keeping score on who has greater sacrifice for each other. You're missing the point. Forget your I. It's a singular we. And whatever the issues are, it's our issues. And we'll deal with them one by one, whether it's my mother, it's your mother, or whatever other issues they are. Right?
We have to work on this issue, and we have to work on this issue.
Precisely. We have to work on this issue, and then we will work on that issue. Whoever it happens to be that's hurting more, it doesn't make a difference. It's not relevant. It's not the issue here.
The royal we.
Yeah. So the key here is that understanding, it's inviting Hashem into the marriage. It's understanding that this thing called marriage is a godly institution that Hashem wants us to be part of. And therefore, we are the fire that submerges into one fire as opposed to competing fires, right? We're one fire that's going to deal with it together. It's perhaps also embedded in what Rabbi Akiva is saying here. Okay. One more line, the Gemara adds to this commentary. And I'm going to open the floor a little bit to think about what this might mean. But first, I'll just give it to you at a literal level. Okay, so this is Rabbi Akiva speaking. We said man and woman, they merit. The presence of Hashem is between them because the letter Yud and Hey split between man and woman, which is God's name. We explained how the Yud matches man, the seed, Hey matches woman, the development. Chachma Bina. So that was Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, of course, is a sage from the Mishnah. Now, Omar Rava adds the following. Now, Rava lives probably at least a century after Rabbi Akiva, maybe even more, because Rava is towards the end of the Gemara's era. So it's probably a few centuries later. He says that he adds as following. Udi Isha, the fire of the woman, Adifa is greater. The way Rashi tells us is greater in its destructive power. Midi Ish from the man's fire. It's more destructive. My time, what's the reason? Hai Metzaref, Hai Loi Metzaref. In the woman, where's the letter Hey? At the end of her name, Aleph, Shin, Hey. So the word Eish is right there without any separation. Aleph, Shin, the fire part of her name. Following? The name, the Isha is Aleph, Shin, Hey. The first two letters is Eish, fire, Hey at the end. Whereas by a man, it's Aleph, Yud, Shin. So the letter Yud separates between the fire. Right. So because the word fire in the name Isha, in woman, is together, so it means her fire is more potent. Whereas in man, the Yud splits between it, his fire is less potent. And thus, the woman's fire has more destructive power if she misbehaves, so to speak. This is...
Yeah, you kind of see this.
Sorry?
Reality. How you see
Yeah, so this is...
in movies or whatever.
Yeah.
Or in real life.
This is the literal level. So I'm not sure exactly how to frame this or how to process it. I can think of many different ways. But perhaps something like this. Right? We said there's two ways of thinking about it. One is, if you merit, Hashem is there. The other way of thinking about this is, if you invite Hashem in by being more refined, then you have then you have a good marriage, right? So if we're talking about inviting Hashem in, then for the man, he has to invite Hashem in between his fire. He has to, in other words, almost like cool it down a little bit. She's not too over zealous, let's say. Right? Maybe. Whereas a woman can retain her entire fire intact, entire passion intact, as long as there's the Hey there, as long as Hashem's name is there. She keeps her entire fire intact because naturally her fire is going to be singular towards her husband. Whereas a man's fire is more likely to spread, and if we got to put the letter of Hashem's name in the middle to cool it down. Even though, by the way I'm interpreting it, it's exactly the opposite of how the Gemara just did, the way Rashi did. Rashi translated on the literal level that the woman's fire is more potent if she messes up. But I'm suggesting that if it's more potent if she messes up, it's also more potent if she doesn't mess up. It goes both ways, right? If she's because she's more likely by nature to be committed, so her infidelity almost hurts more, right? Whereas man to begin with is almost like the default setting is to be unfaithful, and he's got to put the letter of Hashem's name in there to say, calm down. And I mentioned this before, but it's a biological thing. It's not like a spiritual thing. Biologically speaking, you look in the animal kingdom. Males try to spread their seed as far and wide as they can, and females don't. It's the way it is, right? So a man's got to calm down his fire to make sure he's faithful, whereas a woman is by nature much more faithful. So her fire is intact in the marriage. She's got to make sure, but if she steps out, it could be sometimes much more destructive. I don't want to say it's the wrong way, as if like, if men step out, it's not so destructive. It's extremely destructive when a man steps out. It's very, very destructive. So it actually says the fire is not as quick to burn. Right. But then the positive also, when a woman's invested in the marriage, she brings a certain intact fire that man doesn't have the ability to bring in. Much if I'm being clear. Anyway, what do you want to say?
So we were saying that there's Yud Be'ish and Hey Be'isha.
Yeah.
And so and they're both representative of God's names.
They are God's name together.
Oh.
Yud and Hey together is God's name.
Right.
One of God's names is that.
Oh, wow. Okay. And
like Hallelujah.
Right. Right.
Hallelujah is Yud Hey at the end. It's Hashem's name.
Right. But generally also like the four letters of the Tetragrammaton each represent God's name.
Yeah. So in this case, it's just Yud and Hey.
Right.
Yeah.
So
which by the way in Kabbalah, Chachma and Bina are referred to as mother and father. When you read Zohar and it says Av and mother and father, it's talking about Chachma and Bina. Letters Yud and Hey, by the way.
So my question is that do you think there's significance as to why the man receives the Yud? And
yeah, we explained that earlier.
Oh,
because the Yud is the seed, and the woman is development, is the Hey.
Okay.
Following? So we mentioned that before. Yeah.
I was just thinking about the way the letters are for the woman, her fire is at the end of the name.
For a woman, it's at the beginning of the name. The fire is the beginning of the name.
Okay, so it's at the end.
The letter Hey is at the end, yeah.
Yeah, so like fire, I mean, how do you contain a fire out of control? You know, they'll put a ditch around a barrier.
Right.
So the Yud is in the middle, it has sort of this barrier. So
it's the reverse. The Yud's in the middle, so the Yud is not a barrier around the fire.
Right? It's in the middle.
The Yud is contained, not the fire though.
Where's the fire part of it?
Aleph and Shin, broken up by the letter Yud, because Aleph and Shin spells Eish, which is fire, right?
Okay. All right.
So on the woman's side, no, you're right. But that's what I was thinking about also. On the woman's side, the fire is contained with the letter Hey. On the man's side, the Yud's in the middle of the fire, which kind of maybe let me put it this way. I'm gonna put it this way. I'll make it this way. This is an interesting way of putting it. I was saying before that the Yud's in the middle to like cool the fire down, but maybe the Yud's in the middle to bring the fire to its center, to bring it to its center, to keep it centered.
Which is uncharacteristic.
That's right.
Of wildfires. They go out.
Exactly, which is man as a wildfire. It's got to be centered.
Yeah.
Which, if we're going to use Kabbalistic language, I'll use the following. There's this notion in Kabbalah called Nakuda Behechala, which means the point in the chamber. Right. The point in the chamber is often used for this idea, Chachma and Bina. So say Chachma is the kernel of the idea, right? Bina is the expansion, the understanding, the explanation of the idea. So the idea is the point, and then the explanation and expansion, the development is the chamber. And the challenge is that as you develop the idea, don't lose sight of the original point. Because sometimes you expanded an idea so much that you forgot where you started from. Like what was the main point I want to get to, right? So you have to have the Yud in the center to keep everything around it centered at the main point. Otherwise, you can go off on tangents and forget what you really wanted, right? So maybe that's why the Yud's in the middle, so that the guy remembers, with all the fire that you have, remember what's at the center here, right? Whereas the woman's where the woman's Hey is at the end of the word fire, because she's the surrounding element. She's the empathetic surrounding, the understanding, the embrace of it. So her Hey is at the end, which embraces. Follow? As opposed to in the middle, where the original seed, the original idea should, take all the passion you have, but it's got to be centered here. Right? Maybe, so instead of saying cooling down the fire, maybe it's to center the fire, to make sure it's focused in the right place. Maybe that way. Right. But it's just interesting that because the name of Hashem is not surrounding the two fires. It's not like the Yud, A, Aleph Shin, then Aleph Shin, Hey. The letter A, the word H, the word fire and man is split in two with Yud in the middle. So I was saying before, maybe it meant like calm the fire down because it can be too wild. But maybe another way of thinking about that is centering the fire to make sure it comes back to where it's supposed to be. Remember the point. Remember where you're supposed to head. Like keep focus on the main point. Don't let it run wild. Right? Maybe. Anyway, there's lots of ideas here. The floor is open as always. And God willing, tomorrow is some more inspiration. And it's going to be another ingredient in this whole discussion on keeping a healthy marriage and relationship and keeping it passionate and inviting God, keeping the fire, making sure it's focused, making sure it's appropriate, and making sure it's refined. So more on that, God willing, tomorrow. A wonderful day, Eden.